Performing the World is a growing community of people looking for or experimenting with positive social change efforts that contribute to a more peaceful, democratic, and equitable world. Many hundreds of them participate in what is now an annual gathering, conference, showcase, as well as an ongoing movement. Most of the presenters at PTW events are innovators approaching play, performance, and the arts as creative and positive ways of engaging social problems, activating communities, and experimenting with new social and political possibilities. They are interested in not simply protesting what we're against, but creating what we need and want on the ground. The focus of Performing the World is on performance activism, on new ways of creating power through play and performance. Performing the World was initiated by the East Side Institute as an in-person conference in 2001 and continued as a physical get-together in New York until 2020, when the COVID pandemic forced it online. While the intimacy of being in the same space was lost, going online opened PTW to new people who didn't have money to fly to New York or who lived in countries that the US denied visas to. Zoom does away with airline tickets and national borders. More grassroots organizers and people from a wider range of nations were able to participate. Last year, we introduced watch parties. People who had registered to PTW invited family, friends, students, colleagues to get together in schools, community centers, libraries, and homes to watch a session together and talk about it afterwards. Thus, PTW opened up even more and became a hybrid activity, combining Zoom and personal interaction. For more information and to join the community Performing the World, you can visit www.performingtheworld.org or Eastside Institute, www.eastsideinstitute.org.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back. I hope if you were here in our last session, you got to at least breathe and take a bio break, as we often say in academia. I'm Carrie Loebman. I am going to be your host for this session and for the rest of the day to give Des a pseudo break while he just ZJs instead of does multiple roles. I am the leader of education and research at the Eastside Institute, and I am thrilled to be here with all of you. I just wanted to take a moment. I feel like that last session was very impactful. Not everybody was probably there. So maybe take a minute or less than a minute, 20 seconds, and write something in the chat. Don't hit enter. Just write something in your chat in response to the last session. Anything you feel like sharing. And then when I count to 3, we'll all hit enter at the same time. So take about 30 seconds and just write whatever you would like in response to the session on poetry, performance, and power from the Windy Brow in South Africa. Chris, are you trying to raise your hand or? I had the privilege of being at the Windy Brow 2 summers ago, actually, with the said Chris Helm, who just raised her hand, so it seemed appropriate. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Hit enter. Wonderful. Wonderful. Beautifully orchestrated. Love, powerful young people. Glad to be here now. Such a touching, deeply moving experience to be with them. It was really a wonderful experience of young people as creators and as creators of with the material of the world around them. I felt very, very honored. And now we are going to move into another powerful session. We are going to hear of creating new performances of faith, what dementia is teaching us about hope, healing, possibility, and power. So I'm going to hand it over to Mary Fridley and Jay McDaniel and Lynn Casteel Harper, and take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to see you. Can we bring ourselves up? Is this the point where we're, okay, great, thank you. Anyway, it's wonderful to see everyone here. And I am Mary Fridley. I am co-founder of The Joy of Dementia. You gotta be kidding, at the Eastside Institute. And I also lead Reimagining Dementia, a creative coalition for justice, which has about 1,000 members across the world, about 45 countries. And I'm very honored that friends and old and new from those two communities and all the other communities that have enriched me for so many years are here today. I am really excited about the opportunity to introduce you to Lynn and Jay, which I will get to in a minute. But I also want to acknowledge Rabbi Dale Friedman, who began this journey with us, but unfortunately had to drop out because of for family reasons. I will say up top that the conversation we're having today is not intended to represent all faiths or faith leaders, obviously, which is as diverse in opinion and action as any other group of human beings. What I would love is if this conversation, wherever we go with it, could just be the beginning of sparking similar kinds of conversations around the world. And also, in the interest of full transparency, I can honestly say I never imagined I'd be involved in any kind of conversation about faith or religion, my relationship to which has probably at best over my many years been conflicted, at worst probably dismissive and occasionally antagonistic. But here I am, here we are, and that has everything actually to do with Lynn and Jay, both of whom I met through the coalition. Fortunately, Lynn was living in New York at the time, so we first met at an Upper West Side diner, and from there our conversations and our friendship has grown. And what's also grown is actually, and again, out of those conversations, is an interest in creating a conversation about faith or spirituality or religion, whatever one chooses to call it, including what my dear friend and mentor, Dr. Fred Newman, who many of you know, used to call the secular religion of psychology and its relationship to dementia, and having all that grow and deepen. And though Jay is a newer friend, he, like Lynn, is one of the most decent and most philosophical in the most ordinary and humanizing sense of that word. He's one of just wonderful people you have the privilege of meeting. And I think what I've been impacted on, obviously, in great part, is their ability to see dementia, relate to those impacted by dementia through the lens of possibility and not tragedy. And their willingness to grapple with contradiction, conflict, uncertainty, complexity, and something too few of our leaders, be they faith or otherwise, are willing to do these days. And I think if you're not willing to grapple and be open to conflict and uncertainty, I think we're limited on what we're going to be able to do to transform how people living with and impacted by dementia are related to. And just so you know, there are a lot of people around the world, some of them probably on this call, who are using the arts, theater, music, poetry, movement, so much more to work with those impacted by dementia in incredibly powerful ways. I'd love to introduce you all to them someday. But for this moment, our ensemble is not performing in the most traditional sense of that word, though Jay does play a very mean guitar, from what I've heard. But what we really are trying to do, and what we've been doing in this build up to this, which has been delightful, is create a performed conversation, a conversation of discovery, a conversation that's more to do with taking us someplace new than simply sharing facts and figures. So we very much invite you to join us, and in a sense, in honor of the theme of performing the world, of perhaps, however modestly, transforming the authority of truth, assumption, knowing, into the power of yes and listening to build, to discover, to create. And again, we really welcome all of you to play with us and go on a discovery journey with us. So with that, I want to begin the we've begun the conversation. Now I'm going to actively bring Lynn and Jay into it. We'll go on for a little bit, and we really want to leave a lot of time for bringing all of us into this. So we'll kind of, at some point, we'll go into gallery view and everybody can have a chance to participate. So Lynn and Jay, here is kind of the opening, Sally. Now, I know and knew from the beginning that performance and power, at least in the ways that PTW is framing it, is somewhat new to you. I am not asking you to be experts on any of that. However, I would like to ask you, if you will, to share your performance or practice of faith. Who and what has influenced you? How has that journey transformed over the years? So why don't we start there? And then I know that dementia will obviously be an important part of that. I think we'll go into depth about that a little bit later, although please don't feel constrained. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your faith journeys?
Lynn, you want to go first?
Oh, well, Jay, okay.
You don't have to.
Why don't you go, Jay? I'd love
All
to
right.
hear.
All right. You may be able to hear in my accent that I grew up in Texas. And I grew up going to a church, but I had several churches growing up. One was what you might understand as church, but one was also a river, the Guadalupe River in the hill country of Texas. And another was dogs. And if I love animals and love dogs. And if somebody says, write your spiritual autobiography, I would need to mention learning to swim in the Guadalupe River and how important that was to get to know water. And I would need to mention dogs, feeling a sense of kinship, love of our fellow creatures, with their eyes that can look back at you. And that was woven together with an experience in a local Methodist church where truly the only doctrine I can ever remember was that God is love. I did not grow up in a church that talked about heaven or hell or sin or guilt. I knew the words, but the heart of the matter was whatever God is love. And those kind of wove their way together in me, and were part of my journey. I went to college and I majored in English literature and philosophy. And for a while I was going to be a minister. So I went to seminary to prepare to be a minister. But I was insatiably curious about everything. So instead I became a professor. I taught the world's religions at a liberal arts college for 39 years, all of the world's religions. And I discovered a lot of wisdom in them. So I began to think whatever God is, God shines through wisdom wherever you find it, wherever you find it. And that takes me then to friends with dementia and friends with Alzheimer's. And I do sing-along music for folks with dementia, Alzheimer's included, twice a week. And I take in a guitar and I last for about 40 minutes. When I first started doing it, I think I thought of it as a performance that I did, but I no longer think that at all. It's a happening that we do, and we're together in it. And my friends with Alzheimer's, God shines through them to me. And music is a medium through which that happens, and tapping your feet and singing along if you can sing along. But you might call that relational performance as opposed to unilateral performance. It's not one-sided. It's together. And for me, that's all kind of continuous with those early experiences with the Guadalupe River and with dogs and with church, they kind of flow into one another. So be glad to segment those out a bit later, but Lynn, you go ahead. That's my story.
Oh, that's beautiful, Jay. I didn't realize maybe we had so many overlapping pieces. I too grew up along a river, not the Guadalupe River, but the Mississippi River.
Mm.
I was born and raised in Missouri,
Mhm.
halfway between St. Louis and Memphis.
Mm.
And as you spoke, river kind of is in my soul too. And this idea of the bins and the mouth and the sources of my being. So when I think about the performance of faith, Mary, and performance is one of those terms, we've talked a lot about as a group. And and I can remember in divinity school being told, you don't perform. You're not to be a performer when you're leading worship. That it's something, because I think performance was viewed as inauthentic or deceptive. But as we've talked and as you've helped me understand, Mary and Jay, it's performing is not deception. It's actually enacting or becoming. It's playfulness and process. So I'm thankful for that framing of how I came to faith and how people with dementia have really impacted me. I am a Protestant Christian, grew up United Methodist, dabbled in Baptist life, actually became ordained in the Alliance of Baptist tradition. And I consider myself, and now I serve as a pastor at United Church of Christ, a congregation. I consider myself a progressive Protestant Christian, for whatever that means. That I have been tremendously fortunate to be sort of balanced in, I've had a lot of ministry experience in clinical settings. So I have a chaplaincy background, and also to be in a church and community setting with people of all stripes. So I've gotten to work with people living with dementia in the community, in the broader community, and also within clinical settings. And like you, Jay, it's impacted the way I've viewed faith, not just viewed, but enacted or performed faith in very profound ways. I think in Protestant life, going to divinity school, there's a lot of emphasis on words and being this sort of erudite preacher and Bible study. And can be very hypercognitive. But encountering and becoming friends with people living with dementia taught me, faith is something much bigger and broader and more enjoyable than that. And so, I think of friends that I've learned from along the way who have kind of taught me, like, you don't have to have it all together all the time. And that's actually a gift. And so I'll just sort of stop there, Mary, but thank you for that prompt.
Thank you. Jay, I want to come back to you because, and again, I do not want to reduce your journey to this, but when you first joined the coalition, and I, of course, look everybody up to see who they are, I started reading, I guess it's process theology. I hope I'm getting that right. And I was kind of struck by it because I thought that there were some family resemblances to the approach that I and many of my colleagues have used at the Institute, the social therapeutic approach. So I was hoping you could just share a little bit about process theology, what that is for you, why that's been important in your faith journey.
When I went to seminary, I discovered a form of theology called process theology, and it's really been part of my life ever since. And it can be explained in many different ways, but I'll put forth at least one way. It's to think of life and to think of God as a verb, not a noun. And so that then means that whatever God is, God is in this world and part of the becoming of this world, and a kind of healing and creative spirit at work in this world, with whom or which we can, in which we can participate, but also in whom we can have faith.
Mhm.
So to be a process theologian, among other things, is to think that we find God in possibilities for becoming relative to the situation at hand. So whatever the situation in which we find ourselves, there is at work a healing and creative spirit in us, but more than us, that I would name God. And with friends with dementia, I've had family members with dementia. I have a sister with Alzheimer's. I've known a lot of people with dementia, and I work with people with dementia. And I see that spirit in them. It's not in them the way it is in other people. And so you need to be sensitive, in my mind, to the unique way in which the spirit of creative transformation, in which God is at work in a given person's life. And that is a way of getting past the narrative of tragedy. And it's all a sad story. Some Alzheimer's dementia is very painful. I know that. I don't want to hide from that at all. But that's not the whole story. And you can know friends with dementia, and you may have it yourself. There are gifts as well as liabilities. There are opportunities for becoming on both sides. So, Mary, I think I'll stop with that. And if there are further questions,
Sure.
Raise them. But maybe that's the beginning.
Okay, great. Well, maybe this is a moment to bring up the one slide we're going to show. And Lynn, I thought maybe you could read it so we don't have to keep it on screen,
Sure.
so people can hear it. And then we'll continue off of that. So Des, if we could bring up the slide. And this is a statement from her name is Christine Bryden. She was an advocate who was diagnosed with dementia at the age of 46 and has just been an inspiration for people around the world. So, Lynn?
Okay. Why does it matter if I cannot remember, if I repeat myself or forget what you told me? If I enjoy your visit, why must I remember it? Why must I remember who you are? Is this just to satisfy your own need for identity? Your visit is not a cognitive experience that I will store and recall. Let me live in the present. If I forget a pleasant memory, it does not mean it was not important to me. I connect at the deeper level of spirituality, so I treasure your visit as a now experience in which I have connected spirit to spirit.
Thank you. We can take it down. Thank you. So then one of the things that first drew me through your book on banishing, which I recommend everybody read. But then I read an article in the Sun magazine, an interview with you, and I was just rereading it. And again, everyone read the entire article. I am extracting literally a short sentence. So, but at some point, and I think this was also clearly what you were doing with on banishing, is you raise the question of how we as a people, how we as a culture, how we as a world, and even we who are most well-meaning relate to dementia. And you kind of raise the question of, what does that say about us? And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you and Jay together, and in a way, why we created a conversation about faith and not, if you will, dementia. It's not because we don't think it's important, but we wanted to highlight all the ways that dementia has helped us grow and could help us grow as individuals, as a culture, as a people, if we were better able to accept as Jay said, the gifts. So I'm going to ask you to open it up, Lynn. What does it say about us? And what has it discovered? And what have you discovered about you? And why did you, because I know initially you were told not to bother with the dementia ward. So why don't we start there and kind of open it up from there?
Sure. Yeah, what Mary's referring to is one of my first days as a chaplain at a continuing care retirement community where I ended up serving as chaplain for 7 years in the nursing side, and there was a dementia unit, and I was taking on a tour, and by a very kind person who then took me to the dementia unit and said, you know, you won't spend much time here. And of course, the message is that with 200 people here in the facility, there are other places you can go that you will be more efficacious and your time will be more valued. And of course, you know, I talk about like when my spiritual antenna is working, and it's not always, but when it is, the question comes when a whole group of people are kind of out of hand dismissed. What does that say? Not about them, but about us, about those of us quick to dismiss. And so that question began to drive me, and I began finding that I spent the lion's share of my time with people on this unit living in deep dementia. And it was there that what began as a Bible study with a woman named Betty, an evangelical who always carried her Bible and you know, wanted to start a Bible study. So we started a Bible study, very loosely conceived, that morphed into really a spirituality group that met every Thursday on that unit. And people, I was told, wouldn't be able to communicate or wouldn't get anything out of it, ended up teaching me in that group. And how that was done was not necessarily in propositional content, but through the power of touch, Jay song, through singing, through silence, and the power of being, as Christine Bryden said, spirit to spirit. And that's not in some kind of disembodied way, otherworldly way, but in the room together as human beings, and in my tradition, created in the image of God. And that image of God doesn't rise or fall on what our brains can and can't do. So I think, Mary, back to your question, what does it say about the rest of us? I think often we define ourselves very, very tightly and narrowly by our executive functions and our certain kinds of thinking. And what people with dementia taught me is that's a really, really stifling way to live. And so I'm still trying to learn that lesson.
Okay.
Mary, if I could build upon what Lynn just said for a bit, I think that a little more process theology for the moment. In process theology, we're not the same from birth to death. Who I was at age 16 and who I was at age 6 is not who I am now. And my life is a process. And sometimes we define a person as who they have been, but forget to pay attention to who they are in the now. And part of process theology is to say that we need to meet people where they are. That's where we'll find the image of God. It's not necessarily where they have been, or even where they can be. It's where they are. And so when I do sing-along music, we're together in the are-ness. We're together in the now. And that's our identity. It's not that we look back to where we have been or even ahead to where we're going. We're present in that moment. And that kind of togetherness, that kind of being together, in the now together, be it happy, sad, whatever. That's what I myself would call church. But I use the word church not to refer to a building or even to refer to a group of Christians, but to refer to where a group is together, spirit to spirit, in the immediacy of the now.
Beautiful.
Jay,
Oh, no. Go ahead, Lynn.
no, something you said, I was thinking about how much humility it takes to be in the ourness. I love that, in the isness, with who the person is in that moment and who we are.
Right.
And realizing who I was in the past, I'm not even sure I know who I was in the past.
Right.
You know, it's not like it was a stable, affirmed fact that this is who I was and now I'm someone else. It's that humility about even what I knew about myself or what I thought was stable about you, my grandfather with Alzheimer's, what I thought I knew about you before the disease might not even have been complete in any way. So.
Well, I think to accept ambiguity and to live in uncertainty and with the freedom to say, I don't know. I think you and Lynn and we'd both agree that that's part of the life of faith. Faith is not exactly about having answers. It's a way of living in the presence of the freedom to say, I don't know. I'm not even sure who I was. But what matters is the love. What matters is let's be together. It seems to me the world would be a little bit better place if a lot of folks knew that.
One of the things you were saying, Jay, and both of you, and this has come up, I think, in our conversations leading up to this, but the becomingness of living, of kind of being, that finding that space where you're continuously being and becoming. And I remember a conversation with Lois Holtzman, who I don't see her, but I assume she's on the call. She's our director of the Institute and somebody who's obviously taught me much of what I know. And we were talking about in the early days of the joy of dementia and just how and how much people living with dementia, I think, are penalized because they're becoming someone new.
Yes. And
Lois kind of said, well, I think there are other groups of people who get penalized in the same way. And she brought up teenagers. And I remember kind of being a bit taken aback. But the more I thought about it, and now I talk about it all the time, as a culture, we don't do well with becomingness. So in the case of teenagers, you had this once adorable 10, 11-year-old.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have this terror who is now living in your home. And believe me, when I say this at workshops, everybody nods. So this isn't a foreign concept to people. And I just think I found what you're saying helpful, because I do think, and also thinking about relationships when they end, however well or painfully, people often say, I don't know that person anymore. But we don't give ourselves, nor does the culture give us a lot of room to grow, to become significantly other. So I think I just want to throw that in. But I was also, sorry, if either one of you want to respond to that, but I was going to jump to something else, but
I think what you say is very wise, Mary, and really helps us think further about this. And sometimes the idea, I don't know who you are. I mean, sometimes that can mean different things in different contexts. But there are contexts in which if you say that to someone or someone says that to you, the best response is, that's wonderful. Because I can't be pigeonholed. I don't want to be pigeonholed. And I don't want to pigeonhole you into some kind of box that's predefined by who you're supposed to be. You be you. And I'll receive that. I think we learn that in with working with teenagers. and working with folks with dementia. What do you think, Lynn?
Yeah, I totally agree, Jay, and it brings to mind like any number of biblical examples too,
Mhm.
with characters in the Bible who evolve and
Yeah.
start out one place and in some place, we couldn't even imagine. Moses as murdering, and just his whole
Mhm.
life arc up and down. I think faith sometimes where it gets in trouble is when it becomes a place that people feel like they've arrived,
Yeah.
and it becomes kind of this holy sort of, it's a holy static place that you've arrived, and then you're coaxing other people to get on board.
Mhm.
And I think what you're describing, and Mary, what you're talking about, not necessarily in context of faith, but in broader life, is the idea, and again, I keep going back to kind of the humility piece, that we're trying to understand together. And for people of faith, that's often trying to understand and live into a hope for a more, just, loving world that
Mhm.
God is sort of laid out in a sense, but it's not static, and we don't just stand there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. I want to open it up soon, since we have a relatively short amount of time left. But Lynn, I'm hoping, and I'm going to give you a prompt. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about, because this has been one of the things you've said in your writings that I just, again, kind of helped me see things more brightly. But you were talking about the withholding of love and affection from people living with dementia, but you were contrasting that to how we relate to babies and the whole. So if that is at all sparks something, could you don't have to say what you said in the writings, but I
No,
would love for you to share a little
yeah.
bit more about that.
I think working with people and loving people who are living with dementia, we shy away from comparing adults to babies. And so hear me as I say, this comparison is meant to humanize everyone. But we don't with young children who have trouble speaking or don't yet speak or know language as we do. We don't say, oh, it doesn't matter where they sleep, or it doesn't matter what you say to them, and it doesn't matter if they're around beautiful things. We'll just throw them in a closet, they'll sleep, we'll feed them. We believe on some level it really matters, because it does. And that the environments we create for little beings who are becoming really are important, and that love and care and respect are integral.
Yeah.
Why would we deny that on the other end of life? It's a question
Yeah.
thrown back on us in the culture,
Right.
but we
Well,
don't bring that same lens
yeah,
to young children.
yeah. I think and this is the other thing that you've said, and I think one of the excuses we give is, oh, well, why bother? They're not going to remember anything. Which, by the way, I think is a bit problematic, because I think one of the ways we misunderstand dementia is that I think people tend to associate it with the furthest stages, as opposed to there is a broad spectrum of people living with cognitive decline as we speak, and some of them are as young as 46. So that I think we also just have to broaden our lens. But one of you said was, we also unconditionally love babies, even though we know they're not going to remember it. Babies don't particularly, I mean, we might assume that they're going to, we hope that they do. But we're so punitive with people living with dementia, older people in any kind of decline of withhold. Well, why bother loving them? Why bother visiting them? Why bother touching them? They're just not going to remember. I'm not saying everyone does that, but it is it is definitely in the world. So feel free to respond. I think if we can, I think I'd like to go to gallery view and use this as a moment to kind of open it up for others to join us. I know there have been all kinds of chat, and we will be, the three of us will be up here and take Lynn off of, oh, maybe that's me. Maybe I'll go to that review. Anyway, yes, we're all up here. Okay, so please raise your hand or.
Mary Sally has her hand up. Sally
Okay,
Fox.
yeah, no, I'd seen Sally, Sally, take it away.
Well, thank you. This is a tremendous conversation. I really appreciate y'all. One of the differences when I look at a baby is I don't fear that I'm going to become a baby. I'm just can have the experience of a baby the way I might have experience of a dog without worrying that I'm going to become a puppy or something like that. But I think there is a lot of fear of dementia in those of us who don't have dementia that may be conditioning our experience with our friends and loved ones who do have dementia. Like you're seeing the face of what could happen to me that I really don't want. So I was thinking about that in the context of faith and religion, wondering how we help each other with this fear. Because I understand that there are studies that say that more people fear dementia than cancer. How do we deal with the fear without making false promises or offering something like, God will save you because you're a good Christian and you did it right, which is, a horrible static offering that's not even true. But how do we help each other with this fear of the unknown in our journey of becoming with the dementia community?
Thank you, Sally. Jay, please jump in. I think you're absolutely right. And the reason I wrote on vanishing is partly my way of dealing with my own fear. And what it kicked up in me is that I found I wanted to distance myself from those people who kicked that up. As someone, as a person of faith and leading faith community, I think one of the strongest tools we have is to continue to emphasize this idea of community, as opposed to you are your brain and you have to keep it all together by yourself. And when it all falls apart, that's a reflection on you and your character. And so good luck. But as for me, I'll take my vitamins and exercise and I'll never get dementia. Whereas, if we can widen the frame and say we are all on the spectrum of being human, from baby to oldest person, whatever abilities, whatever diseases come our way, we continue to be a community. And for me, that's the body of Christ is what the terminology we use, but whatever you use, that we're not lone wolves out there. And so for me, that's a helpful place to start, and certainly not the only thing, but thank you.
I'm going to call on Hugh, and I just want to ask if folks want to come on camera, please do. I know, and I'm not going to make you do anything, but I actually like seeing faces. So if you can come on camera, please do. It just makes it more intimate for me. Hugh.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. And I love this presentation that you're giving. What all three of you were saying is so loving and human. And I'm not a particularly religious person, but I loved your description of process theology. I think it's very beautiful. And I just in my own life, some of the my mother and my brother and other people in my family have died of Alzheimer's. But I always remember these conversations. I had one of the most intimate and loving conversations I ever had with my mother was when she was about 92 and had dementia. And we always had a very lovely relationship, but there was a certain way that she was much older and kind of somewhat distant emotionally. But one day I visited her, and she said we got somehow talking about she was living in a retirement community, and she said, I'm lonely. I feel like I don't have friends. And I said, "Oh, tell me more about that." And so she did, and she talked about that. And then I said to her, God, I'm so touched that you're telling me this. You've never spoken to me like that so intimately. And I do too, I'm lonely. I have difficulty with friendships and making. And she looked at me, she said, you've always had friends. I can't believe that. And I said, yes, I've had friends, but I also feel what you're feeling and feel lonely and at times. And it was just such a moving conversation, and she couldn't remember anything, but it didn't matter. I've never forgotten that conversation. And one time my partner Phyllis and I went and visited my brother, who was also, very far gone with dementia. But we went out to lunch, and I just remember him. I mean, he was having trouble talking and stuff, but I remember looking in his eyes, and I just felt so close to him, like he was just kind of expressing how much our relationship meant to him, and his eyes were so full of love and also pain. I mean, he was in emotional pain. So anyway, I love this conversation about humanizing people with dementia and people with everything. So, thank you.
I'd like to jump in just for a moment
Please.
and respond to Samuel's comment. Thank you, Samuel. I myself don't like the word dementia, because it seems to define things negatively. I don't like that. So I've been looking for an alternative phrase, and I've coined one which I rarely use, called numentia, because I think that when people enter into what we call dementia, they're actually entering into a new mode of knowing. But it may lack the executive functions with which we're familiar, but it's not unknowing. It just doesn't know in the way that society defines as very, very important, namely executive functions. So I prefer numentia to dementia. It's a new way of knowing. Just wanted to say that. And then when Lynn talks about the image of God in a person, I look for the numentia. I mean, you don't have to reduce it to something, but the image of God is not reducible to executive functions or even the capacity to relate to others. That's beautiful, but the image is not reducible to that.
Sam, and then go to Lois.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, and I'll be quick as I can. I know Lynn and I know Mary pretty well. Jay, thank you for that. I'm from Texas too, and been to the Hill Country a lot. Well, I have early stage Alzheimer's, and my response has been to write a play about it.
Oh,
And I go on stage, and I'll share that and bring me to your community. But and I've spent some time with Mary and Lynn. Lynn, what I love most about your book is that the way you end it, that when the person in your prayer circle or your community could no longer come, it was you, the group, that lost something that we add. And then the faith part of it, I am Jewish. I looked it up again to see exactly what Jewish faith says about people with cognitive decline. That is my choice of words. We are cognitively impaired severely. You may all know that what is it, DM5 or in the neurological world dropped that. It's called neurocognitive disease, major or minor. But I sort of lost my track here. But well, the Judaism part is that you be treated with dignity and respect, and that the obligations of treating people with the disease and with respect. That's what they write about Jewish. I want to say is what Susan and I, who have now been married 58 years, two quick things. We just had our 58th anniversary, and we've had to talk to each other. By the way, I was her caregiver when she was expected to pass from cancer, breast cancer. She didn't. So we had the odd thing of being on both sides of that. Now she is my care partner. We call it love partner. And what we have come to understand, and I think the core of religion is love, is that the ultimate act of love is to be with someone as they're passing, so that they know that they are loved. And it is for the person who's giving that, and it is also the ultimate gift to receive it. It's from both directions. And we work hard. I don't know what happens when I'm going to move from normal cognition to something else. I'm convinced that I will know and feel I'm loved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Why don't we go ahead and Lois, and then why don't we respond to both?
Thank you. Thank you, Jay and Mary and Lynn. I had a thought listening to Sally, and we brought up fear and people's fear. And so then I was thinking, well, people's response and to people living with dementia or pneumentia. I like that, Jay. And the stigma attached to it, to the extent that it has to do with the fear, it's all about us. And it has nothing to do with that person. And it has nothing to do with that person and the grouping of people we define in that particular way. And so when I think of faith, for myself, it's much what it has to do with is faith in something larger than any individual. I don't have a God attached to it at all. But in a way, that doesn't matter whether you do or you don't. It's definitely something larger than me. And so I wondered if that is something you articulate to yourselves or to others, because it's obviously present in everything you've said today, the both of you.
Lynn, Jay, now you can respond to whatever has come before. And Lois's question.
Lois, I think you articulated that beautifully. Yeah, the idea that we're living beyond our singular selves is very foundational to my understanding of faith. And like you say, the fear, when you reframe it like that, you turn the mirror back on yourself. And again, I guess I keep circling back to this idea of humility, like, asking ourselves, what does that mean for us? And it not just stopping there with the singular self, but that we have access, at least in my tradition, to kind of self-transcendence through community, through our faith in that way. But again, it's not a static sort of, as Jay says, it's a becoming, a process.
And I just want to add, I agree, Lois, with faith is trust in something more than even all of us added together. Than even all of us added together. And how you then name that, how you further conceive that, it's up to you. It depends on what makes sense to you. but to live with a trust in something more than even all of us added together, and somehow that it's nurturing, somehow in some mysterious way, it's trustable, it's nurturing, I think is the heart of faith, or a heart of faith.
Mm. Thank you.
Okay, we are almost out of time. Maybe we can steal another minute, but Kermit and Lou, all I would ask is that you make your comments very short, and we will try to respond as best we can. And then I want to end with something. So, Kermit?
I basically put my comment in the chat, so I'll defer to Lou.
Okay. Then Lou.
Yeah. Yeah, hi. I first I want to thank all three of you, Mary, Lynn, and Jay. I feel just I feel slightly irresponsible in asking the question I'm going to ask, because this has been such a rich conversation, and but I was wondering, Jay, you talked about your relationship with dogs, and I was struck by that. You know, I am also such a person, and I feel slightly a little bit like an oddball because of it. And but I thought it was also very interesting that you chose to say that, you know, as a, you know, significant part of your, you know, who you are. And I just wondered if you wanted to say anything more about that.
Well, two things. We belong to the same religion, the religion that loves dogs. And so
Of which there are a few members
yeah,
on this call.
there may
to
be some
know.
others too. Good to be together. When you care for a dog, you experience something more than yourself.
Mhm.
You're connected to that reality, but already that's the seed of trust in something more,
Mhm.
because you're in the presence of someone who's both kin to you and more than you.
Mhm.
Now, of course, that happens with people and rivers and mountains and all kinds of things, but it happens with dogs.
Mhm. Thank you.
We've just guaranteed this is a very popular conversation. So both of you, and then we'll end. I want to give you both a little, just 30 seconds maybe to just say, kind of share just what the impact of this conversation's been on you, and kind of where has it taken you, whatever you want to say, whatever that means to you. And the conversation we've been having.
This has just been such a good conversation, and it's so good to be with all of you, in a spirit of friendship and hope and trust. And may this be part one of other conversations. I would love for this to continue, but thanks to all of you. Thanks especially to Mary and to Lynn, whom I've gotten to know and plan to keep learning from. You can't leave me.
You're here. Lynn.
Well, this has been delightful. I emailed Mary last night. I said, I'm a little nervous. Just had to confess. You know, it is just a really beautiful thing. And Sam said something about love partners, and I thought, oh, I hope you don't mind, Sam. I want to use that for my image of the divine and God going forward. And Jay, you reintroduced me to process theology. It seems like a partner is a great thing to have in a process. So, love partner. I hope that we can be that for one another. Yeah. So thank you.
Well, that I want to just close. This is it's like 8 sentences, but I wanted to close with a poem that was created with this person lives with advanced dementia. So it came out of a conversation with him. It's called I See Something. I see something. Thought I saw something. Looked like sunshine. That's what nature does. Calls confusion in all directions. Never lets you know. Never lets you know nice things are growing. At least we'll have something to look at. We don't reckon on a great deal of sunshine or warmth or fun and games. So thank you both. Thank you everyone for being here. And let's just continue to create fun and games and love in whatever ways we can. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. Thank all
you.
three of you, and thank you to our wonderful Performing the World community. One of the ways we, following Lois, characterize our communities as a love community. So thank you for bringing new versions of love to us today. Okay, we will continue. Today is Performing the World's Marathon Day. So we will be continuing in 90 minutes, a little less than 90 minutes now, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time with Say It Beautifully, Connecting with Strangers Through Poetry. We are having a poetic day. So have a good break, get something to eat, and we will see you in 90 minutes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all
Thank
Give them a
you.
round of applause.
so much.